you'd like to receive the latest updates from EUMOFA, please subscribe to our mailing list. This will inform you when we publish new reports, data sets, and events where we will be participating. So now that that's out of the way, I will present myself again. My name is Margrét Alsvik, and I'm one of the analysts in the EUMOFA team. And I will be moderating the talk today on the cost of raw materials for the fish processing and aquaculture sector. So thank you for joining us, and I hope that you will be enlightened by our experts panelists today, who are here from the processing sector, the retail sector, the market in Europe, and also aquaculture production. All participants, except for our panelists and moderator, will be muted and have their cameras turned off during the session. And if you would like to submit questions to the panelists, then you will have to do so in the chat. So please use the chat to participate to our discussion. There will be an open Q&A session at the end, and questions from you will be much appreciated. Okay, well, I won't keep you any longer. I will introduce our first panelist, Emilia Gargallo, who is a policy officer for the unit in charge of aquaculture and sustainable food systems in the European Commission. So the floor is yours, Emilia. Please share what you have to say with us.
Thank you, Margaret. Good afternoon to everybody. Rather than a panelist, I will say that I will do some welcoming words, and I would like to welcome you to this EUMOFA talk on the cost of raw materials for the fish processing and aquaculture sector. As you know, EUMOFA is the European Commission Observatory on Fishery and Aquaculture Markets. Its mission is to provide market intelligence to stakeholders, and the EUMOFA talks are one of the initiatives carried out by EUMOFA to inform the sector on the market's developments. That is something that we are very careful here in the Commission in order to make sure that you all get to know the facts and how the market's developments are ongoing. Today, as I said, is the cost of raw materials. This has become a hot topic this year, especially since it rocketed in the first part of the year, given the unjustified aggression of Russia in Ukraine. I will not enter in the economic analysis. That is why EUMOFA is here, and that's why we are organizing this talk. But I would like to provide you a little bit with the institutional context at the European level. First, I would like to recall the European Commission communication on food security that was issued at the end of March as a first reaction to the situation. As you know, as the aggression occurred, it was immediately when we realized that we were having an issue with all this, with the raw materials. So from the Commission at the end of March, as I said, we presented this communication that what we did, we presented a range of short-term and medium-term actions to enhance global food security and to support primary producers, farmers, fishers, and consumers. So not only primary producers, but the food supply chains in the EU in light of rising food prices and input costs such as energy and feed. Since then, the cost of raw materials has been the discussion of everybody, and especially we have discussed it several times in the European food security crisis preparedness and response mechanism. This mechanism was created last October in the framework of the contingency plan for food security and food supply. And what it does, it gathers European and national administration and private actors all along the supply chains. And it's a forum where all main stakeholders share their concerns and actions. So you can imagine that this mechanism has been quite active since the end of February, beginning of March, and that the cost of raw material has been a concern and a topic highly discussed in this mechanism. However, allow me, since Margaret has said, allow me to focus in aquaculture, as is the sector that I closely follow. The crisis, as any other food sector, has highly impacted the sector. However, I mean, we have not a specific communication done for the aquaculture sector. Nevertheless, I would like to bring to your attention the EU strategic guidelines for aquaculture that were published last year in May. One of the main goals of these guidelines is to make EU aquaculture resilient, competitive, and an example of sustainability. Although the cost of raw materials was not an issue or a concern as big as it is now back in May 2021, we all know that raw materials takes a big bite in the production cost. So the guidelines were not absent to this concern and took it into consideration. What can we see already? What can we foresee a bit that could alleviate a bit the cost of raw materials? The guidelines advocate for ensuring sustainable feed systems. This means using feed ingredients that are sourced in the way that is most respectful of ecosystems and biodiversity. It also means limiting feed producers' reliance on fish meal and fish oil, using alternative protein ingredients such as algae or insects, or even in some cases the waste from other industries. Contrary to what most of the feed is being based on grain now, which is why the feed is one of those materials that have highly increased the price. As I said that an alternative protein can be algae, I would like to bring to your attention also that 1 month ago, I think actually exactly 1 month ago, we published a strategy on algae. The aim of this communication is to increase the sustainable production, consumption, and use of algae and algae-based products. Algae can be used to produce food, feed, bioplastics, and biofuels, among others. So focusing on algae that we have at our source so that we can farm can be a good initiative, can be a good action, a good initiative to reduce dependence from other sources. And also, I mean, the guidelines acknowledge the active role that the aquaculture has in the circular economy. Waste and byproducts have the potential of providing not only for innovative and sustainable feed, but also, as I said, for biofuels, as the case of algae. Obviously, more research is needed. It's not something that we have at hand just to change right now. But we know that the potential exists there, and we are undergoing research. Hence, from our side in the Commission, we are not only working in adopting measures and actions that can minimize the cost of raw materials, but also reducing, which is quite important, reducing our dependence to eventually avoid that external factors have such an impact in our production. So this is the institutional context. And I know you are all looking into the talk of EUMOFA and how the facts will be presented, since they have done all the analysis. So thank you very much. Thank you very much, Margrét.
Thank you, Emilia, for your welcoming words and for delving into the subject of sustainability. It's very important that we work on making the industry more sustainable. So thank you. Our next speaker is our EUMOFA's own market analyst, Herry from A&D International. He's going to talk us through some of the data that we already have and analyzed in EUMOFA, and he's going to give us a snapshot of how the situation on the market is today. So the floor is yours, Luca.
Thank you, Margrét. I'll try to share my screen now. So, good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Herry. I'm expert market analyst in EUMOFA, so I don't represent any supply chain stage or sector, but my goal here, the purpose of my presentation is just to introduce you to provide some background data about inflation in the fish and seafood sectors, and especially highlighting what we have in EUMOFA databases and what we can provide to the sector. So first of all, I will show you the macroeconomic context and some indicators we have in EUMOFA to show the main drivers of or some of the drivers of the inflation. We see firstly there. Can I just have? No. Okay. The MARE gas oil price. So in France, Norway, Spain, and the UK, and we have the data from 2020, and we see the constant inflation to last summer, and since then the prices of marine gas oil stabilized. This is a very important indicator for all the fishery sector, because as you all know, I guess most the gas oil price is one of the main costs for, especially for the trawling sector, and so this is one of the main drivers and the main reason for the profitability and economic performance of the fishing fleets. One other indicators which is quite important in terms of to explain some of the inflation observed on the market, it's the exchange rate, the euro exchange rate with the main currencies used for seafood trade, and we can see here that the euro has been depreciating quite heavily for 2 years, and especially for 1 year against the dollar, and also against the Norwegian crown to lesser extent, of course. And so this strong evolution of exchange rate have also a huge influence on the cost of raw material, depending on which currency is used for the trade. Especially for the processing sector, it's very relevant, but also for the aquaculture concerning the fish meal and fish oil used for feeding farm fish. One other indicator that we provide in EUMOFA, and which is very interesting, is the consumer and producer price index in the EU. So this is an indicator built by Eurostat, and which is provided on a monthly basis. So here at the bottom of my slide, you can see both indicators at consumer and producer level, and which is interesting, and it's that we see, of course, the strong inflation for all food products, but we can see that fish and seafood products have not experienced the main inflation, which was and we can see that meat and bread and cereals actually have experienced even more heavy inflation since the end of 2021. So it's quite interesting, because in the last decade in EUMOFA we highlighted that the natural inflation on food products was quite high for fish and seafood rather than other food products. And since the beginning of this inflation crisis, it seems that this is not the case anymore, and that other food products experience more inflation than fish and seafood. So these were the main macroeconomic indicators. For what I show you in the next slide is what we have in EUMOFA, because as you may know, in EUMOFA we built three dashboards, actually based on all the data we collect, and one on macroeconomic indicators that I showed you in the previous slide, and one on the fish raw material, especially the raw material used by the processing sector in the EU. So I just made a selection of some main commodities imported from third country in the EU to feed and to supply the processing sector. And as you can see, so this is weekly data for this year, 2022. And as you can see, the inflation is strongly visible on all the main commodities, but there are some differences between the commodities. For tuna, it's quite easy to observe. But for example, on salmon, a peak was reached in the first semester, and then we observed a decrease till a few weeks back, and now it's starting to increase again. So this is not a linear inflation as we can observe in other food commodities or energy, and we can see that there are other drivers such as offer and demand, of course, that could also have a strong influence on prices, and not only inflation of cost of production. For tropical shrimp, we can see also that the trend is not so clear, except for the prepared and preserved product imported from Vietnam. But for the main product for tropical shrimp, which is frozen whole white leg shrimp from Ecuador, actually the prices has been fluctuating all over the year, and we have been in the last weeks on decreasing trend. So you can see that the inflation is not so visible for this specific product. For the main whitefish imported in the EU market, the Alaska pollock, we can see that there is an inflation also quite visible as for tuna, and so this was the sample we selected from our dashboard. But if you want, of course, there are many other prices at different stages of the supply chain. So mostly imports, but also some wholesale in wholesale markets in France, Spain, Italy, for example, and also some retail prices monitored in the dashboard for all the main commodities and all the main species consumed. So if you want more information, I just suggest to go to our dashboards, which are updated on a weekly basis. Just for the aquaculture sector, because we monitor the fish raw material price, but we also monitor some other indicators of costs, especially for the aquaculture sector and the processing sector. So here you can see the trends of the main oils used by the canning sector in the EU. You can see, of course, that I'm sure you're already aware that the sunflower oil has been its price has been increasing a lot since the beginning of the 2022, and we can see that for olive oil this inflation is not visible actually. So depending on the products processed by canners, the cost can be the inflation on cost can be very different. I also put the bread wheat, which to show the inflation also on some other raw material used in the processing sector, which can be also can concern also the fish feed costs. So these were some samples of what we have in a EUMOFA, and showing the different inflation rates for the different costs and different commodities. And so this can provide quite good information on how each sector can be affected by the general inflation, and that depending on the species, on the products processed, the cost and the inflation rate and cost can be very different. Thank you. If you have questions, I'm open to. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucas. I do have a question. Just as you are our market analyst, and I'm just wondering if you, why do you think that inflation has affected fishery and aquaculture projects less than other food items the past year?
Yeah, thank you. Actually, it's not an easy question, but of course, as we saw that there are many, for example, oil or wheat, there are some food products that have been strongly impacted by the war in Ukraine, and especially concerning there has been some shortages for some commodities and some disruption in the trade and logistics. So I guess that some products and some food products that are also more dependent on energy, maybe more than fish and seafood products, that could be many reasons for the higher inflation rate for these products, and maybe that also fish and seafood were already at a high price, and that the margin for inflation compared to the willingness to pay by consumer was reduced compared to other main food products. So there could be a number of reasons. I guess for all food products it is not the same, but it's quite interesting to see that fish and seafood are maybe more resilient to inflation on a global perspective than other food products.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you. I don't see any questions from the audience yet, but there will be an open Q&A session in the end, so hopefully you will get some more questions to answer then. And for now, we will move on to our next panelist, which is Mike Turenhout. He is replacing Gus Pastor, who unfortunately could not join us today. But Mike works for the Dutch Fish Processor and Trade Association, VisFederatie, with data, markets, and resources. And he's also an active board member of the European Processors and Trade Association, APCE, CEP, it's a lot of letters. Mike is going to talk us through the drivers behind increased costs of raw materials and the supply chain for raw materials in the EU. And I know that he likes to dive on his free time, and he actually proposed to his wife during a dive. They brought their father along, or his father along, and he was supposed to record this event for them, but he was distracted by an electric ray, so he forgot to take a picture of the event for Mike, his wife. But the floor is yours, Mike.
Good afternoon, Margaret. Yes, and we do have very nice pictures of that electric ray, so it was an amazing moment. And also thank you very much for the presentation of Lucas. Very interesting to see all the figures you create with EUMOFA. As you said, I'm working for the Dutch Fish Federation. I'm also board member of IPCCEP, and I want to tell you something more about the cost of raw materials for the fish processing. And I have some slides prepared to present, so I will share my screen and dive into my story. I hope you can see the presentation. All right. So when we're talking about the cost of raw materials for fish and processing, I think it's good first to understand where does our raw materials come from that we use in the fish processing industry. So I want to give some insights of the EU seafood market first. So when we talk about the EU seafood market, we talk about seafood we produce in the EU ourselves, so by aquaculture and by fisheries, plus the imports of seafood products from third countries, and then excluding the export of seafood products from that we export to third countries. When we put that in numbers, we can say that we produce in the EU by fisheries in 2021 around 3.6 million tons of seafood. In aquaculture, it's estimated about 1.1 million tons. And from this total of 4.7 million tons, around 1.1 million tons is not for human consumption. So we have an amount for consumption of around 3.6 million tons. And we import from third countries around 9 million tons, and we export around 2.4 million tons of seafood. So in the end, for the consumption market, we have around 10 million tons of seafood, and a large part of it is raw materials we use in the processing industry to process and add value to seafood products for in the end consuming it. But what we see is that we have a relatively low self-sufficiency rate. So 35% of our seafood we consume in the European Union, we produce ourselves. So then the question you asked me, what influenced the raw material prices? And what we see in the recent period is that the prices of the raw materials increased. In my opinion, there are three reasons why the prices of raw materials increased. And the first reason is related to the disbalance between supply and demand. What we have seen, for example, is that for key species, the quotas decreased. And I mentioned here, for example, the US pollock fisheries decreased their quota by 19%, but also ICES advises of Barents Sea cod and haddock quotas that are important species for the EU processing industry decreased. That created a situation where buyers were afraid to not having enough seafood in the end. So it kept the demand high, but the supply of the products dropped, and this disbalance between supply and demand created a higher price for the raw materials and for the seafood materials. Then it's also what Lucas mentioned in his presentation. We have the expensive dollar and also the crown, the Norwegian crown. That are used to buy the seafood, especially from third countries or Norway, where we get, for example, our salmon from. So we pay with a dollar, but we need to pay more euros for the same dollars we use. So that also increased the prices of the raw material. And then as third point, I want to mention that there's also an increased cost of logistics. First, during COVID, there was the increased cost of container freights and air freights. What you can see in the right graph, that where normally prices were paid of around $2,000 for a container, at a certain moment, prices needed to be paid of over $13,000 to get your seafood from point 1 to point B. And later on, when the war, the Ukraine war started, we saw the increase in fuel prices, and that also has had an influence in the increased logistic costs. So these three points were very important to increase those raw material costs. Then I was thinking, okay, now we have the increased cost. What should be done to help the industry to decrease costs, or at least make it better to work with the seafood products? So first of all, is what I told you. There is a demand, and there is a supply of seafood. And what we can do is increase the production of EU seafood, for example. One of the things that we can do is that to optimize the utilization of the quota of the EU fisheries. At this moment, at least in 2021, we utilized around 75% of all the available quota in the European Union. So that means that we kept 25% of the seafood into the sea, where we were able to harvest it under a maximum sustainable yield. So it would be interesting to look how can we improve this take up of the quota, and what should be done to help fisheries realizing this. But the fisheries is there. The production from fisheries is limited, but there is still a lot to win in aquaculture, and it would be great if we can improve our aquaculture culture in the European Union, so that we can also increase aquaculture production. And if we increase this aquaculture production, there will be more raw materials for the industry to use and process for, in the end, the consumption of seafood. Another point is that it would be good to stimulate favorable EU trade policies. You can think about trade agreements with third countries, but also a bit more a general trade policy. That's the autonomous tariff quota regulation, where beneficial tariffs will be put on products, specific products that can be used for processing seafood in the European Union. Other things are optimizing logistics to reduce the cost. To what we see, for example, in the Netherlands, that there were some problems with customs and competent authorities, where unnecessary costs were created, and it would be good if an efficient flow of seafood will be stimulated. And then, of course, it's always good to optimize the value of the raw materials, to use all the materials, all the parts of your seafood, and do not create waste. You can do that by developing new techniques, or to find out to develop new products. But some ideas what are already there are using the flakes of salmon, creating fish burgers or pâtés. And the last thing I wanted to mention is that it's what we see throughout all Europe, is that it is difficult to keep the people in the seafood industry. We need, and especially the qualified people. So we need to stimulate people with knowledge to stay in this industry, and to keep this industry healthy and also sustainable, also for the future. And beside that, it's always good to learn from each other within the sector, but also from industries outside the sector. What we did and what we created is we started the Young Seafood Leaders, where we get young professionals from different companies. We bring them together in a platform where they can learn from each other, work on their on specific skills, but also broaden their network. And for example, what we are doing is bringing those people to other sectors. For example, you see here pictures where they're at the poultry sector. It's on your left, and in the at the pork slaughtery, to learn from things that already happened in other industries, and to take that with them and try to put this in something that can help the processing sector itself, and in that way to, for example, reduce costs. But what we see is that prices go up for all things: energy, raw materials, cost of oil and batter, packing materials, labor. So we will that will always have an impact on the price in near future. So this is what I wanted to present, and I'm open for questions.
Thank you, Mike, for your presentation and insight into the processing industry. Well, in the end there, you talked about a little bit about sharing between industries. What's one of the key lessons that you have learned during these knowledge exchanges?
Yeah, well, there's what I learned is that there is a lot to learn from other industries. That could be, for example, animal welfare. That are discussions we have with industries that are already experienced a lot of challenges with regards to that subject, but also how to add value. How can you use all the parts of the seafood of your the animal product, and to add value to it, and create as less as waste as possible. So that are typical things. What I think, yeah, well, that we can really, they can inspire us, and they can give us some ideas where we can work on to optimize our own industry and to make it more friendly and sustainable where needed.
Thank you. During the past year, has the price development of raw materials for both fishery and aquaculture products increased in a similar manner? Or do you see a difference there?
Well, when you talk in general, you see that the patterns are based are the same, but of course when there's always that the balance between supply and demand. If the supply is high and the demand is low, you see the prices will act, and vice versa. And that you can see that for specific products. What we now can see, for example, in the panelists shrimp industry, you see that there is a disbalance between supply and demand, and you will see that also in other product types. But in general, you see that prices go up for all seafood products.
Yeah. Do you think that prices will continue to increase, or do you think we've reached some sort of plateau here now?
Yeah, well, I was thinking about it, and what I see is that we see that the inflation causes us to have less to spend, and that's also visible in the demand for seafood on short term. For example, you see that, and I expect that we need to pay more for the basics needs if in the near future, and you can think about food or mobility or healthcare or that kind of things. And the question is how does seafood fits in this picture? And I think, and what I already see a bit in happening is that a decrease in seafood consumption will be there. So there will be a less demand of seafood, and that will affect the price. And my expectation is that the price will go down for raw material, will go down a bit in near future.
Well, that's good to hear. We have time for one more question, and I see we have one from the audience now. Do you have any data on where the EU currently stands with regards to utilizing all of the raw materials at its disposal, and how much is still going to waste landfills?
Well, I don't have that information. I know that what I know is what I see in our industry ourselves. We try to create value to all of the seafood product as good as possible, but I think that there is a lot more to win. For example, what we do is we have some waste of for example, fish heads we have that will not be thrown away. But most of the times it will be collected because it's still most of the time good for human consumption. But we export it to a third country where they further process it to, for example, soups or other purposes. And we do have the examples what I did. We squeeze the meat out of the products to make the pasties and create as much as possible. But there's much more to win, and I think if we can create something, or maybe there is some incentive to improve adding value to of the rest products, it would be very beneficial for the sector.
Yeah, thank you. I see we have a lot of questions coming in for you and the rest of the panel here, but I will pick it up in the Q&A session at the end. So stay tuned, everyone. It will be answered, hopefully. So we will now be moving on to our next panelist, who is Catherine McManus. She is the operations director for farming for MOWI Ireland, which is the biggest producer and processor of organic farmed salmon in Ireland. She's worked in the salmon aquaculture industry for over 30 years. And she's going to talk to us about the cost of material input in finfish aquaculture and the impact of global geopolitics on costs, and also tell us about the key inputs that increase the cost of production. I know that she likes to paint on her free time, and she's always had a little dream to become an artist. The floor is yours, Catherine. You are muted, unfortunately. Are you able to unmute?
I'm talking to myself. Sorry. Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you.
Okay, so just to give some context, in Ireland, the salmon aquaculture industry is actually relatively small compared to other significant producers in Norway, of course, and in Scotland. The industry is fairly small, maximum 20,000 tonnes per annum, more likely to produce around 15,000 tonnes per annum, and it's all organically farmed. The industry changed to organic farming in the past 10 years because we couldn't compete with production costs with the other big producers, so we had to find a margin elsewhere. And also, I suppose, organic principles fit very well with the types of coastline that we farm in. So it seemed a natural choice to go into organic salmon production. So I suppose in a way our industry could be considered niche to a certain extent, and with that exclusiveness also comes a cost, and that tends to be that the input costs into our production process and our processing section are actually higher, tend to be higher than the non-organic sectors. And the biggest input cost that we have is actually our feed. Feed accounts for about 47% of our total input cost, and particularly organic feed, because the ingredients, the basket of ingredients that can be used in the production of organic salmon feed is quite limited. And also it must be all organically certified. So that will bring a higher price naturally into the production of feed. What we've noticed since 2021, that these feed prices, while they already are high relative to non-organic feed, they have increased very significantly. So in 2022, we saw a 24% increase in feed prices, and we project for next year that will be 34% compared to the 2021 price. So obviously that has a very significant impact on the industry if you account for almost half of your cost is going to be feed. The other areas that we've seen significant rise in are packaging costs. And just to point out that we manage the entire value chain of the process. So we just don't farm fish, we also process, package and distribute the fish. And most of our production in Ireland is exported, the majority of it into the European Union. So along with that, we also have an increase in transport costs because of, as a previous speaker pointed out, increasing energy costs and fuel in particular. Energy, as we've seen it, has between electricity and marine diesel, which we rely on heavily, we see at least a 60% increase in the cost of those energy sources since 2021. And I suppose the outlook for the cost of these inputs is uncertain, given the current geopolitical situation. On the other hand, while we have these significant rising costs, we cannot pass these on in full to our customers. We anticipate some increase next year in our prices, but not very significant, maybe 10% or so. So we have to find a way of absorbing these costs, and it means really tightening our belts here and trying to manage costs very strictly for at least next year or maybe more. And that's what's so uncertain.
This meeting is being recorded.
Sorry, all of our feed is manufactured in the UK and specifically in Scotland. So that brings other complexities to the import of feed into Ireland. And while we manage it well for the most part, it does bring us own difficulties. We've been asked before, why do we not produce our own feed in Ireland? And that's because the industry is very small and it could not support an independent feed mill. It used to be one many years ago, but because the production base is relatively small, it just wasn't economically justifiable. Given that also we are in the organic market, we tend to produce to customer contracts. We rely on customer loyalty and returning customers. And this will also impact on our ability or willingness to increase the prices very significantly. The Irish industry would like to grow, and we've always had ambitions to grow at least double or maybe treble at the very most of what we produce currently. But unfortunately, the biggest impediment to growth here in this island has been access to aquaculture licenses. The licensing system is very slow and onerous and very protracted. So We still hold the same ambitions, but it's all down to if we can get new licenses to produce more fish in the sea. So really, in terms of next year and the future, it's, as far as we're concerned, it's business as usual, and our growth objectives remain the same, but we are under increasing pressure in terms of costs, and particularly feed costs. The other point I would like to make about feed is particularly for organic feed ingredients. The ingredients tend to be comprised of fish meal and fish oil, which comes from trimmings of fish from other species. So, I mean, that's a good use of waste materials from the other fish sectors. But we also rely on organically produced peas, beans and wheat, and these tend to come from within Europe. And I suppose given the geopolitical uncertainty at the moment in Europe, this will be a concern for the future, the availability of these raw materials that we rely on very heavily. So really, that's, unless anybody has any questions.
Thank you, Catherine. I see there is already a question from the audience here, so I will start with that. MOWI has seen its input costs rise, particularly feed, significantly this past year, and will do so again in 2023. So to what level has it passed these costs on to the consumers, and what have their reactions been? I guess you kind of covered it a little bit, but can you about this?
Yes, we haven't been really able to pass it on to our customers, because most of our customers are actually contract. We have long-term contracts with customers. We establish contracts with customers every year, and we adhere to those. So we have to try and find a way of managing our costs, really, to absorb these input costs, these rising input costs. The other area, sorry, I forgot to expand on, was the whole area of packaging. We rely on EPS packaging in particular to move our fish out hygienically, and to manage the chill chain. And our packaging costs actually have risen again since 2021, anywhere between 35 and 43% of the original costs. So again, we have to try and absorb that. But I suppose the question is, for how long can we take these, and then, you know, will these costs come down? We have seen a softening in energy costs over the past few months, in electricity in particular, but also with other fuels as well. But again, the future for that is very uncertain. So it can be difficult to plan for and budget for when you have that uncertainty.
I mean, the costs that you have described now as put a heavy strain probably on your production, but what has it done to your margins? What
it reduces,
like?
Reduces your margin.
Well, of course it does, but to what extent? Is it still a, well, here's a question now. Do you still consider organic to be a good value product or proposition?
Oh, absolutely, because it's a high quality protein, very high yield, you know, low waste. I suppose another speaker or somebody asked about what you do about waste. We minimize, we've a use for all products. I think the only thing we don't have a use for are the fins at the moment. But we have an outlet for, you know, all the materials, the byproducts we produce. And because we have our own processing line, we can produce products to a certain extent, you know, even recovering the meat from the frames or the skeleton of the fish and these things. So we've been working on that over the years to minimize actually our waste management costs, really. But this is a high value protein source, very rich in EPA and DHA, and it seems a shame to have to waste it. So it's in our interest to retain it as much as possible.
Yes. How has the demand for organic products changed over the past year? We've seen.
We haven't, again, we've got contracts. If I would say there's any indicators, is that we just haven't got enough. We can't supply the demand, and the other difficulty for us is being able to supply every month of the year because of our limited license base. We would like to be in the position to supply every month consistently, but that's not always the case because it's a long cycle in the sea. And that's actually a long cycle from actually the egg, the fertilized egg, to the plate. It's about 3 years, so it's a long investment period, and you know, we have to have. This is where having contracts and loyal customers and that it helps us plan more.
Yeah. Thank you, Catherine. If any more questions pops up here, we will take them in the Q&A session at the end. And then we will be moving on to our final panelist, who is Jürgen Pauly from Globus. He is the market sales manager of seafood and cheese in Globus. So Jürgen, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Very shortly about Globus. We are a company, nearly 200 years, family-owned hypermarket chain with about 60 stores in Germany, 15 in Czech Republic, and 20 in Russia. Let's focus on seafood and the seafood business. We are the last member of the chain before the customer. So we are seeing all, and we have to respect all the trends and developments and cost increases we have in the past. That means regarding seafood, we have a strong price development increase, a strong price increase in the important seafood species in Germany. Then we have a volume which is going down in the moment because the demand of seafood is lowering in Germany, and we have a trend to other protein sources and products in the market. And what we are seeing, I have seen one question, even if we have more expensive and cheaper seafood products, the consumer behavior is very stable. It means that consumers are asking for salmon, for example, our most important product in the market, especially in the fresh market. And even if the salmon has the highest prices we have ever seen. And that causes a strong decrease in volumes, that's the problem we have in our stores in the moment, not only at Globus, but in the market, in the German market. And our influence on the costs are very, very low. We try to have stable prices by with contracts. But during this year, we have strong price increases, especially in salmon and other whitefish products. So we cannot change the importance of salmon in the market. That's a fact. But we are seeing that the discount is a very strong partner in the market, and also the discount, and that's not only in Germany, but in the other markets we are working in. The discount has also to struggle with this increasing fish prices, especially salmon prices. So it's the whole market is concerned of very strongly increasing seafood costs and prices. But the price is not the only driver in our business. What we are seeing that health aspects and also regarding the GMO is important. The social acceptance of seafood. There's more awareness of social aspects in the chain. And we have a strong driver in the price situation, that's logistic costs. means logistics from the origin, let's say from Scandinavia, from the origin points to Germany, and then especially the distribution costs we have in Germany are strongly increasing. So it's another price driver we have in the moment. At the end, the consumer, they are looking for alternatives for cheaper proteins. The pork prices have been decreasing this year in Germany, not only Germany. So there's a trend from fish to pork and other proteins. And that's the situation we have. But we are depending on imports. Germany doesn't have its own fish. We have a fish industry, yes, but it's depending very strongly on imports. So we depend on fish and seafood from the whole world, and we have to struggle with the competition from with other countries like Asia, where more and more seafood will be consumed. That's the situation. We have one chance. We are looking for more convenient products in the market to get more, let's say, more less convenient products with more components from vegetables, for example, to reduce the cost of the total product. That's what we are seeing in the fish, especially in the seafood industry in the moment. Not to sell not only fish fillets or others, but fish products or seafood products with vegetables and others. That's a situation I can tell you we are concerned.
Thank you, Jürgen. You have affiliates in both Germany and Czech Republic. The price development, how has it differed in these markets or been similar?
There's no difference when buying the seafood because we are buying from Norway, Iceland, and other countries. But what we are seeing in the moment, there's a stronger price war in the sales prices in Czech Republic still. I think it will change in the future because the prices are too low. But that's a special Czech situation we have. It's not totally comparable with Germany.
And what about the consumption patterns? Are they also similar in these countries?
No, the seafood consumption in Czech Republic is lower than Germany, even if the German consumption is not high. As we know, it's about 40 kilo average over the years, a catch weight. It's lower, but I think the reason is that the Czech are meat eaters since hundreds of years, and the oceans are far away. So, okay, there are some freshwater products like trouts and carps, but the Czech are not traditional fish eaters compared with Germans. It's more meat.
How has the price of packaging materials affected the retail industry?
Okay. I think that the prices of polystyrene, the boxes for fresh fish, are a cost driver. Paper costs are also increasing in the packaging industry, and this is concerning our packaged products, as private label products we have. That's also a cost driver, but the most important is logistics.
Yeah. I see that Lucas has his hand up, so I'm going to allow him to say a couple of words. Lucas, go. You are muted now, Lucas.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, Jürgen, I had just a question about what you said about substitution effect from fish to cheaper protein like pork. Have you experienced this effect on specific species, or it concern all of the the fish products, or do you see that there are some fish products not concerned by this substitution effect, and some fish products that are more likely to be substituted?
I think the more expensive products like salmon or cod are more concerned of this change of consumer behavior or consuming. In the moment, not so strongly with the canned products, because as you know, the herring and the tuna, these are, let's say, cheap canned products. It's a basis in the market, and it's not changing in the same way like fresh fish or frozen salmon and cod and others. And what we are seeing also, the farm fish like tilapia is also, from our point of view, relatively stable in the moment. Mostly concerned is salmon, cod, yes, these species.
Thank you.
And tuna and other expensive species from the North Atlantic.
Thank you. There's another question from the audience here. Are there any signs that Germany will produce more fish through aquaculture? And would the domestic fish attract a premium?
The German aquaculture industry is a very small industry, if you're asking therefore. It's not much. We have a traditional culture of farming carp and trouts, but it's a very low part, very low part of the small part of the market. We have some, let's say, projects with shrimps. We have some with pike perch, but this industry is not really an industry in Germany. I think it needs years to become a relevant basis of fish farming industry in Germany. It's astonishing because Germany is the biggest consumer market in Europe, but has no own farming, aquaculture.
Yes, here Ireland is the biggest player. So, well, here is another question that just popped in. Many of the shortage issues, coupled with increased prices and optimization of reuse of waste products, can be resolved through technology. Investment is needed. Well, is it actually a question? No. But do you know about any sources of investment that would be? Yeah. Okay, so there. This is a question for the audience, actually. I think we'll just skip through to the Q&A session with the entire panel. I know there are some questions from the audience that we skipped over earlier, so I would like all of you to join me now. And if the audience has more questions for our panelists, please feel free to share. Well, this question was for Mike. Can cheaper fish species replace the more expensive species? Do consumers still have the same demand, or do they prefer certain species?
Yes, thank you. Well, I think that it was also a bit said by Mr. Jürgen Pauly. Yeah, that. But how I see it is that if prices go up and there is less money to buy your seafood product for more households, it will be beneficial for more households to buy cheaper products instead of the more expensive products. And but there will still be a market for the expensive. more expensive species. But I do think that it will have an effect on the buying, the way of buying for consumers, that they more focus on less expensive species if they have less to spend.
Thank you. I have another question for you here. Do you see any policies to help the industry in the near future, or maybe more likely against it, such as taxes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I already mentioned, for example, the autonomous tariff quota regulations that's already in force. What we have, and there will be a new round for 2024-2026, where we can import raw materials for the processing industry on the beneficial tariffs or zero tariffs. And that's with that legislation, we can compete with other third countries for processing, for adding value to the products, and keep the prices of the end products at least comparable with the products that directly come from third countries. Yeah, if you can create, we can keep the ATQ legislation healthy for the processing industry. That's very beneficial. And what I said, that 35% of we are only 35% self-sufficient, so we need the imports from third countries. And maybe it's a bit of misunderstanding that people always say, yeah, from third countries is not sustainable, but most of the products we import from the third countries are sustainable products, of MSC products, ASC products. Think about the most important imported product, for example, is salmon, ASC product, but also a cod, Alaska pollock, are MSC products. That are the three main species we import. So that's an important legislation that will help our industry to be competitive with the third countries and to get enough raw materials for processing. And of course, we have MFAF, the European Fisheries and Aquaculture Fund. That's a fund that can help us in the innovation of the processing industry, and yeah, hopefully we can use it as an European as the European processing sector to bring this sector to a next level.
Thank you. I think this one goes out to the entire panel. Somebody's wondering if you have any forecasts for salmon prices in 2023. Would anyone like to pick this ball up? No, because then I will just pose it directly to someone. Well, if nobody has any input on the salmon prices for 2023, then I guess it would be a guessing game. But Jürgen, how have the prices developed for salmon this year, and how do you expect them to continue in 2023, at least the first quarter?
It's a good question. As I told you, we have seen the strongest price increase in salmon since years in 2022. We are seeing that Norway is producing a lot. We are seeing that markets are stronger developing than the worldwide production in the moment. So there is more business with Asia, for example. And what we are seeing, but we don't know how it will end, is the tax discussion in Norway. That's what we are fearing a little bit, because we don't know what will happen. But in every case, it will not make salmon cheaper than this year. That's my expectation. I'm seeing in the moment. That's all I know.
Yes, thank you. Lucas, do you think, or how does the Norwegian crown currency influence the salmon price, or how do you think it will influence the salmon price in the coming year? Of course, you can't predict how it's going to look next year, but do you have any thoughts?
Actually, from what I know, the Norwegian crown is the evolution of Norwegian crown and the euro are quite close. Because they are at the moment they are suffering from the same lack of confidence from the markets compared to 1 year before. So it seems that it will stabilize against the dollar, for example, but it should stay at low level compared to previous years, at least for the first semester, I guess. But I would say that within the trade from EU from Norway to EU, I think there will be a balance between euro and Norwegian crown for the next month, and so this will affect, maybe this will stabilize a bit the cost of salmon for EU processors.
Yeah. Someone else also asked if we would get a copy of the slides that were used. So first, Lucas, could we share your slides?
Yes. I will share the slides, and maybe I will add some links to the dashboard where I was referring to.
Mike, I guess the same question goes to you, as you also had slides. Can we share your slides?
Yes, of course, no problem.
Yes, then we will share the slides on the EUMOFA website once we publish the video. So thank you. I think there's also a new question down here now. What do you think the impact of the proposed salmon and trout aquaculture tax in Norway will be on EU salmon and trout markets if introduced? Well, that's the potent question. Catherine, do you have any thoughts about this? You are muted, unfortunately. So you're speaking to yourself again now, Catherine.
I can't really comment on that because I'm in a totally different jurisdiction. You know, it's obviously, so I suppose somebody from Norway would have to comment on that.
Yeah.
As long as that idea doesn't spread, that's okay.
Well, that's the danger, isn't it? It could easily spread in the industry if it gets a foothold in Norway. Well, the tax in it, I could give a short answer, but the tax in itself has been, well, it's out on hearing now, and the 40% tax has effectively put a stop to the contract market in Norway, which of course will influence the salmon price, as the proposed tax proposes to use the spot price of salmon as a basis for taxation, which means that companies could potentially pay a tax that is higher, or taxes for income that they actually haven't earned as it stands right now. So I think that is going to see a lot of revisions during the coming months. I know they already have started to look away from the spot price basis. So hopefully that goes away before the New Year's. But yeah, I'm sure it's going to influence the EU salmon and trout markets if it's proposed as is.
Yeah, what I know from our industry is that it creates a lot of uncertainty at this moment. and it's of course difficult or not possible to realize contracts for the next year. So it's still waiting how that this will evolve, but that it has an influence on the price will be there, and of course maybe there will be a new plateau where we can what we can expect that the price of salmon will be. So maybe it will be higher compared to previous years.
Yeah. So very interesting to see, at least. A new question here for the entire panel. Does the panel feel that European fish, wild, farmed and processed, carries a higher value in terms of provenance? And if not, what can be done to establish such value?
May I answer?
Yes, please do.
I think the first question is what is important for consumers. As we are seeing, sustainability is a must. It doesn't carry the value. And I don't know really what help us objectively in Europe to get better prices or higher prices for higher value in terms of convenience, as asked here. Okay, sometimes there is a little, it depends also on the image. But we are seeing customers are asking for antibiotics, or is the antibiotics in the fish, and it depends. So it depends strongly also on the media policy, what they are, how they are informing about seafood. We shouldn't neglect this, but it's not easy to say that a European seafood product has more worth or has a higher value than another one. That I wouldn't say. Because if we are buying shrimps, for example, shrimps are mostly coming from Asia or South America, but we need shrimps, and we wouldn't get so much shrimps from Europe in the moment. That's not an alternative to buy other products. If somebody wants to buy shrimps, then he's buying shrimps, but not from Europe.
Thank you, Jürgen. Lucas, I see your hand is up.
Yes, just to complement what Jürgen just said, we saw that the preference of the consumer preferences toward the different criteria of sustainability, price, origin, these preferences were quite different depending on the member states, based on the consumption tradition. And there are really huge differences in the preferences depending on if you are in Spain or in Germany or in Northern Europe and Southern Europe, or next to the Mediterranean basin and next to or in landlocked countries, for example. So it's not easy to provide a general answer for the EU. What we saw that in many countries, we can see that there is a preference, that could be a preference for local product, but that would mean regional or national production, and the EU is more abstract, I guess, more difficult for consumer to feel that it comes from it's local compared to, of course, if someone from a consumer from Spain, if the salmon comes from UK or Norway or Ireland, maybe it doesn't make a big difference in terms of origin. So I guess that's the preference of consumer would depend on countries, and of course there are many other criteria that are important, such as sustainability mostly in Germany or in Northern Europe, and also price or freshness or so it's not easy, yes, to answer this question at EU level. I think there are many strong differences still in the EU market.
Thank you, Lucas. Mike, your hand is up, so I'll give you the floor.
Yes, hi. I'm unmuted. Yes, I do think that there is a market for products that comes from nearby, and but that's especially, in my opinion, the fresh market, where you're talking about. But in the end, there are so many products that we do not or cannot produce within the European Union, and that still has a demand for the EU consumer. So international trade will be important at a certain level. But when we talk about adding value from, and if there's a possibility that you can add and can get a higher value in terms of provenance, that would be the fresh market, I think. And it will be a niche market.
Thank you. I think we have gone through all of the questions from the audience. Do you have any questions amongst yourselves? Anything you would like to ask the other panelists? Then now would be the time. No? Then I think we've come to the road's end for this EUMOFA talk. I would like to thank all the participants for joining us today, and especially our panel of experts. It's been very interesting to hear what you have to say. Thank you so much for participating today and sharing your insight with us. It's very much appreciated.